All right. Ready to dive into something a little different today?
Yeah, bring it on.
We're tackling Australian building
The
codes.
secret language of construction, right?
You got it. Specifically, the National Construction Code.
NCC for short.
Yep, the NCC. Think of it like the rule book for how buildings in Australia get made.
From houses to skyscrapers, the whole shebang.
And the coolest part, the NCC is always changing. It's not static.
Totally. Adapting to new technology and everything.
Exactly. We've got excerpts from the 2022 NCC Volume 2 here.
Plus the housing provisions.
And we're going to break down how it all works, what it covers, the whole 9 yards.
Let's do it.
Okay, imagine this. You're building your dream house, got the
Good.
plans, found the perfect spot.
Sounds idyllic.
But before you even think about construction, there's this whole world of regulations.
Enter the NCC.
Right. It's like the blueprint for making sure your dream home is safe, efficient, the whole deal.
Not just pretty, but built to last.
Exactly. So, how is this massive document organized? Where do you even start?
Well, the NCC actually comes in 3 volumes.
3. Wow.
Volume 1's for the big stuff, apartment blocks, shopping centers, all that.
Okay, makes sense.
Then there's Volume 3, which is all about plumbing and drainage.
And Volume 2.
That's our focus today. It covers smaller buildings like houses and townhouses.
Ah, the stuff that affects everyday homeowners.
Exactly. It's all about making sure those buildings meet the essential standards for safety, health, all that good stuff.
You know, I was flipping through the source material, and I noticed the NCC has been amended a few times since it started as the BCA back in '96.
Oh yeah, tons of times.
Why so many updates?
It's got to keep up with the times, right?
Yep.
New technology, changing needs, even climate change.
Yeah.
It all plays a role.
So it's constantly adapting.
Exactly. That's how it stays relevant and makes sure buildings are up to the latest standards.
All right, so let's say I'm using the NCC for my own project.
Right.
How do I even know which rules apply? It seems a bit overwhelming.
It can be, but the NCC actually has a pretty clear system for that.
Oh.
There are governing requirements, which are the must-dos, the non-negotiables.
Okay, the essentials.
And then there's explanatory information to give you some context and guidance.
So the what and the why of the code.
Precisely. For example, there's Section A5G2, Evidence of Suitability.
Evidence of suitability.
It's a governing requirement, basically saying you need proof that your materials and designs actually meet the code standards.
So can't just wing it, you need the evidence to back it up.
Nope. The NCC wants to see the data.
And that's where the explanatory information comes in.
Right. It might direct you to resources like the ABCB Handbook for Evidence of Suitability, giving you a step-by-step guide on how to show you're compliant.
Okay, a guide within a guide.
You got it. Making sure those buildings are not just compliant on paper, but actually meet the safety and performance goals the NCC is all about.
So speaking of interesting details, I found a few things that caught my eye.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, there's this thing called watermark certification.
Ah, that's not just a fancy logo on a tap.
It's not.
Nope. It's a big deal here in Australia, actually.
Really?
It's a mandatory scheme ensuring that plumbing and drainage products meet strict quality and safety standards.
So kind of like a seal of approval saying this product's safe for my home.
Exactly. If you see that watermark label, you know it's been independently tested and certified to meet Australian standards.
I never realized there was such a backstory to a simple label.
It just shows how important these regulations are. They're there to protect people and their property, not just random rules.
Okay, another thing that stood out, aluminum composite panels needing to be labeled in a specific way.
That's all about fire safety.
Fire safety.
Yep. Some of those panels, which are often used in cladding, can be highly flammable.
Oh, I see.
So the labeling helps make sure builders and consumers can easily spot the panels that meet fire safety standards.
So like a shorthand for saying this material's safe to use.
You got it. It helps prevent potential fire hazards, especially in larger buildings where they use a lot of cladding.
And then there were these NATHERS certificates.
Those are all about energy efficiency. It stands for Nationwide House Energy Rating Scheme.
So like a rating for how green your house is.
Basically, they're mandatory for new homes now, and they show how energy efficient a house is.
So it's not just about the structure anymore, but also about being environmentally friendly.
Absolutely. Building codes are evolving, reflecting a more holistic view of what makes a good building: safe, durable, energy efficient, and good for the environment.
And I saw this term building classifications in part A6 of the NCC.
Oh yeah, building classifications are key to the NCC.
What are they all about?
They categorize buildings based on what they're used for and how people occupy them.
So a hospital wouldn't have the same rules as a house.
Exactly. Different buildings have different safety and performance needs.
Makes sense.
The NCC has 10 main classifications, ranging from Class 1 for single-dwelling houses, like your typical detached home,
Okay.
all the way to Class 9 for healthcare buildings, which are way more complex.
So a hospital would need stricter rules because of the people in there and the risks involved?
Right. And even within those classifications, there could be subcategories.
Like what?
Take Class 9 for healthcare buildings. There's 9A for a traditional nursing home. And then there's 9C for a residential care building, where residents might have a mix of care needs.
Why is there a difference within aged care?
Because people's needs can change, right? A Class 9C building might have residents transitioning from low to high needs as they age, so the classification allows for that.
So the code is adaptable to the real world.
Exactly. It's not just rigid categories, it's about making sure buildings are designed for their purpose and the people using them.
And I noticed the NCC uses diagrams to explain these classifications.
Right, like figure A6G2C, which shows how different classifications can exist on the same plot of land.
So you could have a Class 1 house, a Class 10A garage, and part of a Class 2 apartment building, all on the same lot.
Totally possible. It shows how those classifications work in practice, not just individual buildings, but how they relate to each other and what's around them.
Now, when most people think building codes, they think fire safety.
Definitely a top priority, especially here in Australia.
For sure. How does the NCC handle that?
One of the key concepts is fire resistance levels, or FRLs.
So how fire resistant a wall or door is?
Yeah, but it's more than just whether it burns. It's about whether it stays strong under heat, how well it stops heat from transferring through.
So will it collapse or let the fire spread?
Exactly. And the NCC gets really specific about this.
Like how?
Tables S1C2H to S1C2L list out the FRLs achieved by different materials and construction methods.
Oh, wow. So if I wanted to know how thick a steel column needs to be for a certain fire rating, I could look it up.
Yep, it's all there. And these tables are based on real testing, not just guesses.
It's like the NCC is a super detailed instruction manual for building safe structures.
You could say that. And those FRL requirements change based on the building classification.
Of course, a hospital would need higher fire resistance than a shed.
Exactly. The level of resistance needed depends on the building's purpose
Yeah.
and the risks involved.
It's incredible how much thought goes into all this.
It really is. The NCC considers so many factors to make sure buildings are safe, both in terms of structure and fire.
I've noticed the NCC isn't just about walls and roofs. It covers some unexpected stuff.
Oh yeah, it goes way beyond the basic structure.
Like what?
Well, one thing people often overlook is dampness and moisture control. It's covered in sections H2P2 and H2P3.
Why is that so important? It seems like a minor thing.
Dampness can cause serious problems. Mold growth, damage to materials, even structural issues over time.
Oh, wow.
The NCC requires things to prevent moisture buildup and ensure good ventilation.
So it's not just keeping rain out, but managing moisture inside too.
Exactly. And the solutions can be simple, like a vapor barrier, good ventilation, or using moisture-resistant materials.
So the code's looking out for the building's long-term health.
Right. It's about a holistic approach to building design.
Then there's swimming pool access, covered in H7P1.
Yes, that one.
Seems obvious, but it's interesting to see it in the building code.
It shows how the code's not just about the building itself, but safety in general. Swimming pools are great, but they're also a drowning risk, especially for kids. So the NCC requires barriers and latches to prevent accidents.
So it's like the code is saying, we're not just worried about the house falling down, but everything that could happen around it.
Exactly. It's a comprehensive approach to safety for the people living there and anyone visiting.
Speaking of being comprehensive, how do these national codes work across different states and territories?
That's a great question.
We are a federation, after all.
Right. And while the NCC is national, each state and territory can have its own variations or extra requirements.
So a national code with some local flavor.
Exactly. It allows for flexibility, addressing regional differences like climate, building practices, or specific priorities.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Look at the Northern Territory. They've got specific requirements for thermal performance outlined in Section NT, H6D2.
What kind of requirements?
They mandate a minimum 5-star energy rating for new homes.
5 stars. Why so high?
Well, think about their climate. The Northern Territory gets extremely hot, so energy efficiency is super important.
Makes sense.
The higher the star rating, the better the house is at regulating temperature, meaning less reliance on air conditioning and lower energy bills.
So the national code sets a baseline, And then states and territories can build on it to meet their own needs.
Exactly. It balances consistency across the country while allowing for solutions tailored to local challenges.
Looking at the NCC, I have to admit, it can feel overwhelming.
Oh yeah, it's massive.
Tons of technical jargon in there.
It is designed to be comprehensive, which can make it seem a bit daunting.
But there must be some help for navigating it, right?
Oh, for sure. The NCC actually has built-in tools to help you out.
Oh, good. Like what?
Well, it's got a whole section dedicated to abbreviations and definitions.
So if I come across a term I don't understand, I can just look it up.
Exactly. Like if you see NABERS, which stands for the National Australian Built Environment Rating System, or conditioned space, which means the parts of a building that are heated or cooled.
Like a built-in dictionary for building codes.
You got it. And it also lists all the reference documents.
What do you mean by reference documents?
Well, the NCC doesn't exist in isolation. It draws on a whole bunch of Australian standards, the AS documents, and even international standards like ISO documents.
So if I need to know more about a specific material or technique, I can follow those references.
Exactly. It can be a bit of a research rabbit hole, but a good one.
So the NCC isn't just a standalone document, it's part of a larger network of information.
Right, all working together to ensure buildings are built to the highest standards.
You know, it's amazing to think about this whole world behind the scenes that most people don't even know about, all dedicated to making sure our buildings are safe, functional, and sustainable.
It really is. And it all starts with understanding these codes, the foundation for creating a built environment that meets our needs and lasts for years to come.
Well, I feel a lot more knowledgeable about building codes now.
Me too.
Yeah.
And honestly, we've only just scratched the surface.
Right. There's so much more to explore. Let's delve deeper into how these national codes work in the real world. Maybe look at some state variations and how they're adapted to local needs and challenges.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it.
Awesome. I can't wait. All right, so we've got the basics of the NCC, but how does it work in the real world?
Good question. It's one thing to read the rules, but another to see how they're used.
Exactly. We were talking about state and territory variations before.
Right. Each state has its own unique considerations, you know?
Can you give some examples of how that plays out?
Sure. Let's start with New South Wales. They've got some really specific regulations for what they call bushfire-prone areas.
Oh, that makes sense given their experience with bushfires.
Definitely. The NCC and NSW takes bushfire risk super seriously.
So what kind of extra rules do they have?
They've got additional provisions for building design and construction in those areas, all aimed at reducing the risk of fire damage.
So if you're building a house near bushland, you might need to use different materials or construction methods.
Exactly. Things like the type of roofing material, the design of the eaves, even the landscaping around the house, it can all make a difference in preventing fire spread.
So it's about building a house that's not just strong but smart, adapted to the environment.
Absolutely. And that's where those state variations come in, making sure the NCC is relevant to the specific challenges of each region.
Any other examples that stand out?
Well, staying with the climate theme, up in Queensland, they focus a lot on cyclone resilience.
Oh, right, because of the cyclones they get up there?
Exactly. They have specific requirements for things like roof tie-downs and window shutters, all designed to withstand those strong winds and rain that cyclones bring.
I never really thought about how building codes would need to account for cyclones.
It's all about anticipating hazards and protecting people and property. Building codes play a vital role in that.
So it's like the national code sets a foundation, and then the states and territories can add on layers of protection depending on their needs.
You got it. It's a system that balances consistency and flexibility.
I think that's really important for people to understand, that these codes aren't just arbitrary rules, but a carefully considered system to keep us safe and ensure our buildings last.
I totally agree. They represent a lot of knowledge and experience from the building industry, always evolving to meet new challenges.
It makes me realize that building a house is way more complicated than I thought.
It definitely can be, but the NCC is there to guide you through it.
It's like having an expert on hand, making sure everything meets the standards.
Exactly. You're not alone in this process.
We've been focusing on the NCC Volume 2 and the housing provisions, but I know there's a whole universe of building codes out there.
Oh yeah, tons. It's a whole library of codes and standards. But don't worry, you don't need to know them all.
So what are some of the other important ones?
Well, there's the Plumbing Code of Australia, for one.
Ah, that makes sense, covering all the water and drainage stuff.
Exactly. Then you got codes for specific materials, like steel, concrete, and timber.
So each material has its own code.
Pretty much. These codes set the standards for manufacturing, testing, and using those materials in construction.
It's not just about the overall building, but making sure each part is up to par.
Right. And then there are codes for specific types of construction, like fire safety systems, energy efficiency, and accessibility.
Wow, it seems like everything has a code.
It's all about making sure everything is built to a high standard, meeting people's needs, and minimizing any potential risks.
It's amazing how much detail goes into all of this.
It's all part of ensuring a safe and functional built environment.
I have to say, thinking about all these codes and regulations makes me appreciate the complexity of building a house even more. It's not just about putting bricks and mortar together, it's a whole network of rules and guidelines.
It's true. Building a house involves a lot of different skills and knowledge. But the good news is, you don't have to be an expert in everything. The building industry relies on collaboration and specialized expertise.
So it's a team effort.
Exactly. You've got architects, engineers, builders, plumbers, electricians, all working together to create a safe and functional home.
And the codes provide a common language for everyone to work with.
Right. A set of standards they can all aim for.
Now, with all these changes happening, what are some of the challenges you see? Keeping up with the NCC must be a job in itself.
That's one of the biggest challenges for sure. The NCC is a living document, always evolving with new technologies and materials, even societal changes.
So you can't just learn it once and be done.
Nope, you have to stay updated, which can be tough for builders, architects, even regulators.
I bet.
The ABCB, the Australian Building Codes Board, does a great job of keeping everyone informed, but it's still a lot to keep track of.
Are there any other challenges you see?
Another challenge is making sure the NCC is applied and enforced consistently across different places.
Right, because even though it's national, each state manages it.
Exactly. And that can sometimes cause confusion for builders and developers who work across state borders.
I can imagine that being a headache.
It can be. But luckily, organizations like the ABCB help a lot in promoting consistency and providing guidance to minimize those issues.
Sounds like a work in progress, but it's good to know people are working to make it as user-friendly as possible.
Absolutely. It's all about collaboration, communication, and a shared commitment to creating a safe and sustainable built environment.
Thinking about all this makes me wonder about the future of building codes. What's on the horizon? What big changes are coming?
Well, one of the biggest trends is sustainability. As we become more aware of the environmental impact of construction, there's a growing emphasis on energy efficiency, water conservation, and using sustainable materials.
So we're likely to see even stricter regulations in those areas.
Definitely. The NCC is already heading that way, but we can expect even more focus on sustainability in the future.
What kind of things might we see?
Well, stricter requirements for insulation and energy-efficient building envelopes, for example.
Okay, making the buildings themselves more efficient.
Right. We might see a bigger push towards renewable energy, like solar panels becoming standard in new homes, and maybe even incentives or mandates for using recycled or sustainable materials.
So a much greener future for building.
It has to be. Construction has a big impact on the environment, and building codes will play a key role in making it more sustainable.
Are there any other trends you're seeing? Anything else exciting or concerning about the future of building codes?
One trend I'm excited about is the increasing use of technology in building design and construction. Things like 3D modeling, building information modeling, or BIM, even robots on construction sites.
Robots building houses. Sounds futuristic.
It's closer than you think. These technologies are being used in some places, and they can really change how we design and build.
How will that affect building codes? Will they need to be rewritten for all these advancements?
It's likely to lead to a shift towards more performance-based regulations.
Performance-based, what does that mean?
Instead of saying exactly what materials or methods to use, the code might focus more on the desired outcomes.
So instead of saying you must use this type of insulation, it might say the building must achieve this level of thermal performance.
Exactly. And that opens up more possibilities for innovation and creativity. Builders and designers have more freedom to find the best solutions as long as they meet the performance goals.
That sounds like a good thing. More flexibility and encouragement to find better ways of doing things.
That's the idea. It's about being outcome-focused, which can benefit both the building industry and the environment.
So the future of building codes might be less about rigid rules and more about setting goals and letting people find their own way to get there.
It's definitely moving in that direction. It's an exciting time to be involved in building and construction. As technology improves and we understand sustainability better, how we design and build will keep changing And building codes will be right there, shaping that evolution and ensuring our buildings are safe, efficient, and ready for the future.
Wow, I never thought I'd be so fascinated by building codes. This deep dive has really shown me a whole new world.
It's been a great journey of discovery, and we've covered so much, from the basics of the NCC to fire safety, state variations, even a glimpse into the future.
It's been a great exploration, and I think our listener is walking away with a much better understanding of this complex world of building codes. But it feels like we've only just scratched the surface. There's always more to learn.
Yeah, it does feel like we've only just dipped our toes in the ocean of building codes.
There's always more to learn, that's for sure.
So for our listener who wants to explore further, where can they go? What resources would you recommend?
Well, the great news is that the full NCC document is available online.
The entire thing online.
The whole shebang. You don't need special access or anything. It's all right there on the ABCB's website.
The Australian Building Codes Board.
Yep. They're all about transparency, making sure anyone can access this information.
That's pretty cool.
Whether you're a builder, an architect, a homeowner, or just curious, it's all there for you.
So I could just Google National Construction Code and find it? Pretty much. It's laid out in a user-friendly format on their website.
And you mentioned the ABCB housing provisions before?
Oh yeah, those are great too, especially for people focused on housing.
So it's like a companion guide to the NCC.
Exactly. More focused on houses, townhouses, that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
It breaks down the key requirements in a way that's easier to digest, especially if you're new to all this.
Okay, so we've got the NCC and the housing provisions. Any other resources you'd suggest?
Each state and territory has its own building authority or department.
Right, so there's a local angle too.
They usually have websites with tons of info, local amendments, interpretations of the NCC, that kind of thing.
So if I want to get specific about the rules in my area, I should check those out.
Exactly. And then there are all those other codes and standards we talked about, like the plumbing code and the ones for specific materials and construction types.
It's almost overwhelming how much is out there.
But it's also exciting, right? This whole hidden world of building codes that affects us all.
Absolutely. It shapes the homes we live in, the places we work, everything.
It's like they're the silent guardians of safety and sustainability in our built environment, making sure things are done right.
Well said. So for our listener who's ready to learn more, don't be intimidated.
Dive right in.
Explore those resources and discover this fascinating world of building codes.
And remember, it's not about memorizing every single rule.
It's more about understanding the bigger picture.
Exactly. Why do these codes exist? What problems are they solving? How are they adapting to a changing world?
Those are the questions to keep in mind.
It'll make the journey so much more rewarding.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
From the details of the NCC to the future of building codes, it's been quite a deep dive.
I agree. It's been a fantastic exploration.
I hope our listener is feeling inspired to learn more, maybe even contribute to this evolving world of building codes someday.
That would be incredible.
Well, on that note, it's time to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of Australian building codes.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listener, if you have any questions, thoughts, or stories about your own building code experiences, please reach out. We love hearing from you.
Absolutely. Your curiosity is what makes these deep dives so fun.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep building.
See you all later.